I had joined Windsor, been participating, went through the fast that they have at the beginning of the year. At the end of the sermon that Pastor Johnson was preaching that day, he had an altar call, and everybody came up to the altar. And now keep in mind, even though I'm serving God, I'm still a pessimist about God and what God can do. And so certain features in the church I always had questions about, like laying of hands and people falling all out, this, that, and I just thought it was a bunch of hogwash. So we go through the altar call, and to add, salt to the wound or whatever, there were about maybe 3 people in front of me as Pastor Johnson was going through laying hands and praying over people, and it was this older lady who was standing there for prayer, and God forgive me, but she, when Pastor Johnson laid his hand on her head, she didn't fall all the way out. She fell back. Then when she realized she was falling, she stopped, sat down, then laid down, and then reached back to be sure her hat was still on, and then laid out in the spirit. So at this time, I'm sitting there, laughing to myself, trying to keep my head down, because I'm like, okay, now, wasn't nothing about this real, wasn't nothing about this real, So I'm sitting there, so as I'm sitting here, hands extended, praying, trying to get myself back focused, I can hear Pastor Johnson coming next to me, so I get back focused on what my prayer is. And then, next thing you know, I'm looking up at the ceiling. So, and I'm still kind of in a daze because what had actually happened and while I'm opening my eyes, he's prophesying over me. The call that's on my life. He's prophesying over me, real strong. He's going through, this thing, that thing, and just completely prophesying over my life as I'm looking up at the ceiling. So as opposed to being, so partly I'm in the spirit and confused, and then I'm like, okay, who is this man pointing at me, preaching over me at the same time? And then just still battling the fact that I'm actually laying on my back right now, and I don't know how I got here. So that was my first real experience with being hit by the Holy Spirit. And I'm like, wow, this actually happened. So after that, that's when I started meeting with Pastor Johnson, and I ended up, being, he going through the ministry process and him asking me the pivotal questions and determining that, I had an actual, call on my life. And, but at that moment of having that Holy Spirit experience, that's when I really, for the first time in my life, felt the full presence of God and felt the full presence of Jesus in my life. And I knew that, okay, it's something to this thing, even beyond my skepticism that I may not understand, but it's something to it that I need to take heed to. So that was the first time I really got saved. But before my baptism, before I got saved at that moment.
But he hit you with his fist. He stole while he was there.